Good morning, and welcome to another special edition of That's a Good Cup of Joe. So as we continue our pilgrimage through what the foundation of our country is by walking through the Constitution of the United States, our system of government under the leadership of Donald Trump continues to hobble along, wounded but moving forward. He just got back from his trip, and that plane is still, the canary in the coal mine. What is it about this politics that's going to really do something to straighten this out? Republicans are standing up against it. Really, $400 million. I mean, how blatant. And what's even more depressing and sad is that it's a used car, basically. It's a used car. $400 million not being paid for by him to get because it's being considered a gift. However, he's okay with it being a used car. But he is he's a grifter. He's let's make a deal guy. But the thing is that it's going to cost us as Americans to retrofit. And this is the thing. He's going to get it all tricked out, right? He's going to want to get it all tricked out. All the bells and whistles of Air Force One and the gaudiness of what's in there. Really, should that be what American exceptionalism be represented as? Really, I mean, even the White House right now looks tawdry. It looks gaudy. It hurts the eyes. The goldenness of it. You know what I mean? Is that what we're representing? Is that how we want to be represented as? I mean, come on. You want to talk, how divine intervention is, all you Christian there, nationalists who are after him, and about saying how he's supposed to be this thing from God. I mean, really, the golden calf, as it is, right? We should be idolizing these things, the golden statues, as it is, because that's what he's turning the White House into, is this golden shrine. And then with this $400 million plane, if you've seen the pictures, I mean, it just doesn't seem like what America should be, because that's not how we should be looking to represent ourselves. Our ability for bringing in individuals through our immigration process, which is right now broken, and being able to get things working together. I know we have a lot of history about separation, it's hard, but in reading through the Constitution, you would see exactly what the founding fathers envisioned this country to be, given the blueprints of it. Now, we went through a couple of things: the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of the Confederacy. Now, you would think that once the Articles of the Confederacy was held up, was initiated, that would have been it. But unfortunately, it wasn't, because something else needed to happen with it. And if you go through the National Archives, they tell you exactly why the founding fathers were concerned about the Articles of the Confederation. Because you would set it up, then you have to execute it. But there was no mechanism. And then looking at the archives, this is what they said they had the concerned about in regards to the Articles of the Confederation that we reviewed the last time. And it states concerns about the Articles of the Confederation. And it says, just a few years after the Revolutionary War, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and George Washington feared their young country was on the brink of collapse. America's first constitutions, the Articles of the Confederation, gave the Confederation Congress the power to make rules and request funds from states, but it had no enforcement powers. It couldn't regulate commerce or print money. The states disputes over territory, war pensions, taxations, and trade threatened to tear the young country apart. Alexander Hamilton helped convince Congress to organize a grand convention of state delegates to work on revising the Articles of the Confederation. And this led to the Constitutional Convention. The Constitutional Convention assembled in Philadelphia in May of 1787. The delegates shuttered the windows of the State House and swore secrecy so they could speak freely. Although they had gathered to revise the Articles of the Confederation, by mid-June they had decided to completely redesign the government. There was little agreement about what form it would take. Out of the fiercest arguments was over congressional representation. Should it be based on population or divided equally among the states? The framers compromised by giving each state one representative for every 30,000 people in the House of Representatives and 2 representatives in the state. They agreed to count enslaved Africans as 3/5 of a person. Okay? Slavery itself was a thorny question that threatened to derail the Union. It was temporarily resolved when the delegates agreed that the slave trade could continue until 1808. So 1808 was supposed to be the cutoff point in regards to slavery. All right. So, I mean, that would be a good promise into the future about making sure that, you know, Africans, or slaves as they were known, because they weren't African Americans, they were slaves, you know, had a way out, right? But the thing is, in my mind, is that what would have happened afterwards? What would be their plight afterwards? So, as it continues, writing the Constitution, after 3 hot summer months of equally heated debate, the delegates appointed a committee of detail to put its decisions in writing. And near the end of the convention, a committee of style and arrangement kneaded it into a final form, condensing 23 articles into 7 in less than 7 days. On September 17, 1787, 38 delegates signed the Constitution. George Read signed for John Dickinson of Delaware, who was absent, bringing the total number of signatures to 39. It was an extraordinary achievement, tasked with revising the existing government. The delegates came up with a completely new one. Weary about centralized power, and loyal to their states, they created a powerful central government representing widely different interests and views. They crafted compromise. It stands today as one of the longest living and the most emulated constitutions in the world. Ain't that something? All right? Didn't want anybody taking their own state's conditions into as a framework of making sure that everything they do is centered toward them. However, centralizing the government in order to work for everyone, right? A centralized government. And those you know, it didn't say a centralized king, because the Declaration of Independence kicked that motherfucker to the curb. So that's what that did. So, in regards to ratification, the founders set the terms for ratifying the Constitution. They bypassed the state legislators, reasoning that their members would be reluctant to give up power to a national government. Instead, they called for special ratifying conventions in each state. Ratification by 19 of the 13 states enacted the new government. But by the time only 6 of the 13 states reported a pro-Constitution majority. The Federalists, who believed that a strong central government was necessary to face the nation's challenges, needed to convert at least 3 states. The Anti-Federalists fought hard against the Constitution because it created a powerful central government that reminded them of the one they had just overthrown, and it lacked a Bill of Rights. The ratification campaign was a nail-biter. The tide turned in Massachusetts, where the vote now, amended later, compromise helped secure victory in that states and eventually in the final holdouts. So that's how it went from a transition from Articles of the Confederacy to the U.S. Constitution. A lot of things in the middle of there to really, how they made the sausage. There's a lot going into those sausages in order to get the links together. So, with that, led to the Federalists, right? They had to find a way to convince those states to work toward this government, which lies the creation of the arguments, which turned out to be the Federalist Papers. And these documents, I believe there were over 80 of them, right? 80 different articles, which broke down exactly what was needed and why it was important for this new Constitution to be enacted as a means of moving this country forward and bringing together this whole thing. So before I get into that, because we're going to review the Federalist Papers and understand the mindset behind that constitutional document and why it is so important to our framework, and how the thoughts that it went into creating this Constitution as the blueprint for our country goes against everything that Donald Trump is trying to do, and to instill upon us the need to make sure that what we're doing is to sustain our country, to keep our democracy, and move forward. But what I want to do is read basically the preamble of the Constitution, right? And this was written in 1787, and it states, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States." So, that there is the opening. But what I want to do is, I want to review the first of the articles of the Federalist Papers, because this was the general introduction to the series of articles, to introduce the people back then of what they were trying to do in the hope to create this new union of states, and exactly of what they hoped that it would bring forth for our country. So what I want to do is I want to read through, and this one was written by Alexander Hamilton, and it goes, "To the people of the state of New York, after an unequivocally experience of the efficiency of the subsetting federal government, you are called upon to deliberate on a new Constitution of the United States of America. The subject speaks its own importance, comprehending in its consequences nothing less than the existence of the Union, the safety and welfare of the parts of which it is composed, the fate of an empire, in many respects, the most interesting in the world. It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been resolved to the people of this country by their conduct and example to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. If there be any truth in the remark, the crisis at which we are arrived may with propriety be regarded as the area in which that decision is to be made. And a wrong election of the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as a general misfortune of mankind. This idea will add the documents of philanthropy to those of patriotism to heighten the solitude which all considered and good men must feel for the event. Happy will it be if our choice should be directed by the judicious estimate of our true interests, unperplexed and unbiased by considerations not connected with the good public. But this is a thing more ardently to be wished than to seriously to be expected. The plan offered to our deliberation affects too many particular interests, innovates upon too many local institutions, not to involve in its decision a variety of objects foreign to its merits, and of views, passions, and prejudices little favorable to the discovery of truth. Among the most formidable of the obstacles which the new Constitution will have to encounter may readily be distinguished the obvious interest of a certain class of men in every state to resist all changes which may hazard or a diminution of the power, the emolument and consequences of the offices they hold under the state establishments, and the perverted ambitions of another class of men, who will either hope to aggrandize themselves by the confusions of their country, or will flatter themselves with the fairer prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies than from its union under one government. All right? That could be the precursor of what is to be considered the way of getting into the Civil War. But that's just my thought process under that. It is not, however, my design to dwell upon observation of this nature. I am well aware that it would be disingenuous to resolve indiscriminately the opposition of any set of men merely because their situations might subject them to suspicion, into interest or ambitious views. Candor will oblige us to admit that even such men are actuated by the upright intentions, and it cannot be doubted that much of the opposition which has made its appearance or may hereafter make its appearance will spring from sources blameless at least, if not respectable, the honest errors of minds led astray by preconceived jealousies and fears. So numerous indeed, and so powerful are the causes which serve to give a false bias to the judgment, that we upon many occasions see wise and good men on the wrong as well as on the right side of questions of the first magnitude to society. This circumstance, if duly attended to, would furnish a lesson of moderation to those who are ever so much persuaded of their being in the right in any controversy. And a further reason of caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection that we are not always sure that those who advocate the truth are influenced by purer principles than their antagonists. Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives, not more laudable than these, are apt to operate as well upon those who support as those who oppose the right side of a question. With there not even these inducements to moderations, nothing could be more ill-judged than the intolerant spirits which has, at all times, characterized political parties. For in politics, as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword, heresies, and either can rarely be cured by persecution. And yet, however, these sentiments will be allowed to be, we have already sufficient indications that it would happen in this, as in all former cases of great national discussion, a torrent of angry and malignant passions will be let loose. To judge from the conduct of the opposite parties, we shall be led to conclude that they will mutually hope to invite the justness of their opinions and to increase the number of their own converts by the loudness of their declamations and the bitterness of their inventions. The enlightened zeal for the energy and efficiency of government will be stigmatized as the offering of a temper fond of despotic power and hostile to the principles of liberty. An over-scrupulous jealousy of danger to the rights of the people, which is more commonly the fault of the head than of the heart, will be represented as mere pretense and artifice, the stale bait of popularity at the expense of the public good. It will be forgotten, on the one hand, that jealousy is the usual concomitant of love, and that the noble enthusiasm of liberty is apt to be infected with the spirit of narrow and illiberal distrust. On the other hand, it will be equally forgotten that the vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty, that in the contemplation of a sound and well-informed judgment, their interests can never be separated, and that a dangerous ambition more often lurks behind the specious mass of zeal for the rights of the people than under the forbidden appearance of zeal for the firmness and efficiency of government. History will teach us that the former has been found a much more certain road to the introduction of despotism than the latter, and that of those men who have overturned the liberties of republics. The greatest number have begun their career by paying an obsequious court to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants. In the course of the preceding observation, I have made my fellow citizens, to putting you upon your guard against all attempts, from whatever quarter, to influence your decision in a matter of the utmost moment to your welfare, by any impressions other than those which may result from the evidence of truth. You will, no doubt, at the same time have collected from the general scope of them that they proceed from a source not unfriendly to the new Constitution. Yes, my countrymen, I own to you that, after having given an attentive consideration, I am clearly of opinion it is our interest to adopt it. I am convinced that this is the safest course for our liberty, your dignity, your happiness. I affect not reserves which I do not feel. I will not amuse you with the appearance of deliberation when I have decided. I frankly acknowledge to you my convictions, and I will freely lay before you the reasons on which they are founded. The consciousness of good intentions disbands ambiguity. I shall not, however, multiply professions on this head. My motives must remain in a depository of my own breast. My arguments will be open to all, and may be judged of by all. They shall at least be offered in a spirit which will not disgrace the cause of truth. I propose a series of papers to discuss the following interesting particulars: the unity of the Union to your political prosperity, the inefficiency of the present Confederation to preserve that the Union, the necessary of a government that least equally energetic with the one proposed. To the attainment of this object, The conformity of the proposed Constitution to the true principles of Republican government is analogy to your own state constitution. And lastly, the additional security which its adoption will afford to the preservation of that species of government, to liberty and to property. In the progress of this discussion, I shall endeavor to give a satisfactory answer to all the objections which shall have made their appearance, that may seem to have any claim to your attention. It may perhaps be thought superfluous to offer arguments to prove the utility of the Union, a point no doubt deeply engraved on the hearts of the great body of the people in every state, and one which, it may be imagined, has no adversaries. But the fact is that we already hear it whispered in the private circles of those who oppose the new Constitution that the 13 states are of too great extent for a general system, and that we must of necessity resort to separate confederacies of distinct portions of the whole. This doctrine will, in all probability, be gradually propagated till it has votaries enough to countenance an open aval of it. For nothing can be more evident to those who are able to take an enlarged view of the subject than the alternative of the adoption of the new Constitution or a dismemberment of the Union. It will therefore be of use to begin by examining the advantages of that Union, the certain evils and the probable dangers to which every state will be exposed from its dissolution. This shall accordingly constitute the subject of my next address. So, I want to first apologize to some of the words that I don't get right, but I hear by reading this of the necessity of unifying this central government. And from what it appears is that the different states, even though they're becoming the United States through the the Articles of the Confederation, still felt that maybe they operate under their own system of leadership, right? So the argument is being made that perhaps, okay, the states will have their abilities, from what I can tell. However, a centralized government to enact, so as to to create a uniformity thing. So this is the heavy lift, and this is the thing that I think was important, because with going through all of this, the preamble to the Constitution is very important, because it sets the stage of a union of the people here, and to govern together as a unit, as one country. So as it says again, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So this here is, with the Federalist Papers, the beginning of the argument. And I'm sure the Federalist Papers may have, and I'm to keep trying to remember school, high school, middle school, elementary. I believe it was introduced, but it wasn't explored, because it just set the pace for the development of this country. But the Federalist Papers, I believe, was more discussed and researched and argued in the universities and higher institutions. Because you have constitutional lawyers who would fight for the rights of Americans if they feel that those rights have been violated. So they would have this prior knowledge. Jamie Raskin, very eloquently and versed in the Constitution, is one of those heroes in this endeavor. So this is the beginning of going into the deep dive in what the foundational principles are and the establishment of this Constitution that we are living under today, and which is being threatened by the prospects of our current Republican Party giving Donald Trump full control with the help of the Republican or the conservatives, because they like to deem themselves as conservatives, conservative judges of the Supreme Court, who gave him immunity as long as everything he does in the office of the presidency is in the function of the presidency, so he is absolved from any criminal acts. That's really fucked up, because the creation of the establishment of the Constitution creates co-equal branches of government. Everyone checks each other to make sure that the other one isn't losing control or their minds in regards to service to the country. And you just got to wonder, is this why they don't want to centralize education? This is why they don't want to make sure that everyone gets knowledge so that they can actually think about and articulate what's going on. And this is why in our capitalism society we basically have this new form of slavery, which is debt. Because we live our lives, and as workers, our income may not be to the level for which we need to pay our debts. We need to pay what we need to pay in order to survive. So if you got workers that do nothing but turn in and out, in and out, in and out, because they're trying to make a living to pay for, take care of their family and pay these bills and, take care of these other obligations, that they won't pay attention to what's going on in Washington. And they'll just, leave the government on autopilot, because, we'll put people in there, let them run it, and I'll just get back to my work and just, try to, get from under this weight of debt that I have. It's fucked up that they, for so long, college was free. Then all of a sudden, under Ronald Reagan, right, I believe, they started doing tuitions. And now, Donald Trump saying, nope, just got to start paying. Knowledge, you shouldn't have to pay for knowledge. You should be able to learn. And when you learn something new, be inspired to make better. Every new generation should be springing us forward in our society. And I think this is what the fundamental understanding of the Constitution is to create a better union so that the people working together can inspire greatness in our country, to bring us forward. Not to live in a separate and unequal space of society. It says the United States of America, and Joe Biden kept saying this. We are the United States of America. And together, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can achieve. And despite whatever everybody says about Joe Biden, in my opinion, Joe Biden, he was a very, and he still is, a good man, a very good president. Man went to church practically every Sunday. So all you Christian nationals who believe in religion and all this shit, divine intervention of God is what you believe Donald Trump is. But the man who walked his faith, the man who lived his faith, was Joe Biden. Donald Trump, he's the one that's putting out the golden calf for you to worship. Joe Biden is the one who had his belief in his heart. So, next up will be Article 2 of the Federalist Papers. And that there, ladies and gentlemen, I think would be very important for us to consider, because it goes into concerning dangers from foreign force and influence. Now, how fitting that is regarding Trump's $400 million golden idol sitting, I believe, in Los Angeles right now. How fucked up is that? So that is today's Good Cup of Joe.